In this example, we expand the idea of taking I to various powers. Let's try part A. We have I to the negative 9. Well, remember that a negative exponent brings that down to the denominator. So I to the negative 9 is 1 over I to the 9th. Okay, so we just need to figure out what I to the 9th is. Remember that for I to the n, for any n, you take n and you divide it by 4, do long division, and you get some remainder. Okay, once you have that, you have a few options. So based on what the remainder is, you have I to the n equals something, right? And the only options for the remainder are 0, 1, 2, or 3. And the corresponding values of I to the n are 1, I, negative 1, negative I. Okay, so let's figure out what I to the 9th is. So for I to the 9th, we take 9, we divide by 4, that goes in twice. 2 times 4 is 8, subtract, we get a remainder of 1. Remainder of 1 tells us that the answer of I to the 9, or I guess the result, tells us that I to the 9 equals I. Okay, there we go. So all of that to tell us that this is actually the same thing as 1 over I. But to have an answer with complex numbers, you want it to be in a plus bi form. And note that there are no denominators, no i's in the denominator for a plus bi form. Everything's up in the numerator. But we have an I in the denominator. To get it out of the denominator, there's a trick. We're going to multiply here by I over I. Let's see what happens. Doing that gives I up top, and on the bottom we have I squared. But remember that I squared equals negative 1. That's the most important thing to remember in this section, right? So this becomes I over negative 1, which then becomes negative I. So what is I to the negative 9th? Well, it's I to the, it's negative I. Let's try part B. We have negative 2I to the 7th. All right, since these are multiplied together, this 7, this power of 7 goes through to both of them. So this is really negative 2 to the 7th times I to the 7th. All right. Well, negative 2 to the 7th, maybe you know what that is, maybe you don't. It turns out it's negative 128 I to the 7th, so we just need to figure out what I to the 7th is. All right, so let's do our division trick here. We're going to take 7, and we divide that by 4. Well, 4 goes in once. 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract, we get 3. So here's our remainder. Remainder is 3. All right, go to our chart here. 3 tells us that I to the 7th is actually negative I. Right, so this tells us that I to the 7th is negative I. So then this negative 128 I to the 7th becomes negative 128 times negative I. Negative times a negative is a positive, so all of this evaluates to positive 128 I. There's our answer to that one.